Uh, Good afternoon, school board. Jennifer, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Jennifer, do you want me to just jump right into this?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, school board, for letting me do this by Zoom. I don't know if it was informed, but the flu bug hit my house hard from my elementary kids and older family members. And I didn't think it made much sense for me to be there face to face. I don't think anyone there would want me there, but let me just kind of go through the bond update for you guys, where we are. And for some board members who are maybe new or don't remember who I am, I was hired as the district's municipal advisor to assist them through kind of the bond process. And so you can kind of see on page 2 of the presentation, that's kind of our regional experience of some of the local districts that we work with there. And then the next 2 pages were what was shown before of some of the different types of districts that we've passed bonds for and assisted with. And then the update for you guys is on page 5, where it shows our 2022 successes. And the 2 that stand out, and the reason I bring this here, just, if you feel like you have any questions, because these communities are kind of, you're right in between Gridley, where we passed the bond, and we actually did a Wheatland bond. It doesn't show that for some reason, but in November of 2022, we passed a Wheatland High School District SFID bond for $16 million. And each of them had kind of different strategies, different messaging, and different ideas on how we got there. But then I can talk about that in the next couple of pages. On page 7, this is the main update for you guys. Last time we spoke, we didn't have your 22-23 assessed value. So if you look kind of at that chart, where it goes from 2005 down to 2023, it shows your latest assessed value of 5.631 billion. So it actually grew 8.99% from the previous year, which is fantastic to have that type of assessed value growth. On the right-hand side on that page, it shows the history of the district from the bonds that it was successful with. And it shows the bond that was unsuccessful in 2018, 74 million for 50.8%. And then you'll kind of see that bottom bullet point, which explains bonding capacity. And your bonding capacity number is different. It actually has gone up to approximately 75 million. And the reason the number has gone up is because anytime that your assessed value grows or you pay off some of your outstanding principal debt, that number is going to get higher and higher. So probably next year, even if your tax base was flat, but you paid off principal, your bonding capacity is probably going to be high 70s. If your tax base grows by 5%, your bonding capacity will be 80 million. That number does not mean the limitation on how much you can ask your voters to approve for a bond. The bonding capacity number just means that at any given second or moment, this is how much you can put your district into debt up to a certain amount. And so that amount as of Thursday, April 20th is 74.9 million. Okay, so that number will change. If we turn to the next page, so with tax base growth of 9%, means that your bond amounts can go higher when you want to ask your voters to approve something. And so, as you guys are probably familiar, the $60 tax rate, which is the maximum amount that you can ask your voters to approve under a Prop 39 election, conservatively generates $96 million, 96.5. Okay. Now, when I say conservatively, you can see that kind of in that italicized fine print under that $60 number, it says assumes AV growth of 3.5%. Okay. If we wanted to use AV growth of 4%, which isn't unrealistic because your tax base for the last 18 years has been growing at over 5%, even including the recession. By just going to 4% AV growth rate assumptions, we could ask your voters to approve over $100 million. Okay. Another thing to consider would be, as opposed to you seeing this bond structure where we're selling a bond in 24, we're selling a tranche of bonds in 26 and a tranche of 28, we can turn this bond program into a 6-year bond program instead of a 4-year bond program, using 4% AV growth rate instead of 3.5. And your number is probably closer now to, $110 million. Okay. So the world is your oyster when it comes to what you want what you want to ask your voters to approve. And so generally how you get there is, one, you have to establish what your facility needs are. Do you have over $100 million worth of needs? I think the answer is probably yes. Just like every school district has a considerable amount of needs. But then another component is, well, what are your voters willing to be open to approving? I'm not nervous about the total amount of the bonds, whether it's 80 million, 90 million, 100 million. That's just a very big number to the everyday voter. But the thing which resonates with voters, and which means the most, what makes sense to them the most, is when you talk about the tax rate, because the tax rate is truly what affects the everyday homeowner. And whether that tax rate's $30, $45, or $60, or $49 or $52, we will find out what the appropriate tax rate number is through the voter opinion survey. So if we go to the next page, where we can talk about voter demographics, this is updated as of Monday. So you have about 32,000 total voters. 39% of those voters are Republican, 29% Democrats, 32% other. Those other voters are represented by independent voters, declined to state voters, libertarians, Green Party. That's what represents that other group. 76% are registered as permanent absentee voters. Even though the state of California's recall sends out absentee ballots to every voter, these are the voters who pretty much registered saying, hey, I want to be a vote by mail voter regardless of what the state does. Okay. And then you can see when it comes to the age of your voters, you have a little bit of an older voting population with 41% of your voters age 55 and older. And the reason why this is a relevant fact is that, you're going to have a lot of these voters that probably don't have as much of a connection to the schools like they once did. If you're a senior citizen, and you're saying, well, my kids are long gone, they don't even live in the area anymore. Or you have some people who retired there who have no connection. Messaging to these voters is going to be much different than messaging to the 25 to 44-year-old voters who are really, right in the thick of things with their kids being in elementary school, PTA meetings, school auctions, and so when it comes to communication, you're going to communicate different ways with each individual voter. Next page, please. So when we talk about voter turnout is important because certain elections bring out different types of voters. And so generally your presidential election, your November presidential election, is going to bring out everyone and their dog, right? You're going to have all your young hippie voters who are coming out to rock the vote. You're going to have your people who have never missed an election, who they're going to come out to. You have extremely high turnout for presidentials, and sometimes that could be the best time to go. The only problem when it comes to high turnout elections is that lots of people decide to go on high turnout elections. The state of California does most of their propositions, if not all, pretty much now in November elections. Normally community college districts, if they do tax measures, they do in those measures. Cities, they do their measures a lot of times in November high turnout elections. And so something to be mindful of when it comes to when your district is deciding to do a bond or not is, well, what's going on in the community? Are there competing tax measures? And can we win in March of 2024? So that is the next available election date for your constituents, is it's either March of 2024, which is the presidential primary, or it's November of 2024, which is the general election for president. And so I always tell districts, the best time to go is when you're going to win, right? And so how do we know if you're going to win? And so if you go to the last page on the timeline, this is kind of what it takes in order to do a March of 2024 election timeline. Okay, prepare project list. You'll see the project list, you guys, is probably already done, or it's probably close to being done, or it's been done 3 times and then some. Okay, there's a board meeting to say where you guys, let's explore it. I believe that from my conversations with the administrative team, they said that, hey, you guys are open to the idea of exploring. So what does it take for us to kind of figure out if we're ready or not? Well, that third line right there, which is conduct voter survey. To me, this is one of the most important components of being ready, because if you don't have the support of your everyday community member, you're never going to be able to be successful at the polls. Okay. And there's been a lot of things since we did the survey for you guys. Was it last year and a half ago? A lot of things have changed. We were coming out of COVID. The economy was kind of wishy-washy. Everyone was hearing about inflation. And honestly, it showed in the November ballot for school districts, to where there was a lot of school districts that lost. I think there was only 3 Republican-leaning school districts in the state of California that won their bonds November of 2022, and 2 of them were with us, with Gridley and Wheatland. Okay, so the types of questions that we ask in the survey, are about projects, about bond amounts, about ideological questions, about how they feel about the district. Maybe we could throw in some, random questions. Do you think inflation is a big deal? But I know that one topic that has been discussed is, do we create something called a school facilities improvement district? And that is what we did at Wheatland High School District, to where for the purposes of bonds, we actually carved up the district based off of Plumas Lake voters. And they actually voted on a bond to where if they, since they pass it, they're paying for it. And all the improvements go towards a new Plumas Lake High School. They're not ready to build the high school yet with 16 million, but it's kind of some of the preliminary planning money that they're getting, and they're going to do a future bond on an upcoming ballot. And so that was one thing that we were discussing with your team and some of the other, let's say team members at a meeting maybe a month or so ago, was, maybe do we carve up your district to where, the voters that feed into one high school would vote for and pay for and receive only improvements for the area of the district that they're voting on. And do we create 2 SFIDs to where one's on the north side and one's on the south side? And so this is something, if the district were interested in doing, that we would flush out in the survey. So we would specifically ask that question, or 2 questions about, would you be open to the idea if we, carve the district to where voters that, that feed into XYZ, high school and their feeder schools, would you be open to this idea of passing a bond for them? Would you be open to the idea, if you went to this feeder school? And what we can do in the survey is we can make sure that half the voters that take the survey are part of potentially one SFID, school facilities improvement district. And then we could do a survey where the other half would be for the other side. And then what we do is we kind of compare all the notes, we compare all the results, and we figure out if one, is this something that your voters want to do? And then 2, also, is a bond something that your community wants to do? And then, is March the right time? Because also part of the survey is, and this is numbers are all over the place right now, but we want to make sure that also half the people that take the survey are voters who, no matter what, they are going to vote in March of 2024, because we have that data. We know that if a voter has never missed an election, that we know they're going to vote in March of 2024. And then we want to make sure that the other half of the people that take the survey are people that miss presidential primary elections, but they never miss a November presidential election. And then so we analyze that data on the March guys and the November guys. We analyze the data, if we put it all together, and then we figure out, hey, is March an option for you guys, or do we have to punt to November? And then some of the other things to consider that your administration is aware of, or stuff that they're going to be filming is, you know, what are there competing tax measures? Is the city going to do something? Is the college going to do something? You know, because maybe it'll be close in March and maybe November is better. But if we know that the city and the college are doing something in November, well, then maybe we're better off doing something in March. Okay, so there's all these things and there's all these balls in the air right now. But at the end of the day, one of the most important things, in my opinion, is getting the survey up and running, because the survey is going to tell us if March is an option. Because if March is an option, well, then you can kind of see what the rest of these steps are, from survey results presentation, initiate public information programs, speaking with elected officials, large taxpayers, community service groups to discuss the potential bond or bonds. Let's finalize the plan based off of the community outreach, and then bring a resolution to you guys in the fall if we're looking at a March election. If the survey comes back and it says that March is an absolute no chance, no way, no how, well, then we know that the only option for the district is to consider a November election. And then we have a lot more time to try to fine tune maybe some of these thorns that exist of maybe competing tax measures. So that is the update with updated numbers since last time that we met. And I'm open to any questions that you guys may have.
Are there any questions for the consultant? I guess the one question I have for you, sir, is when would we see a sample of the questions? Would that be at this, I guess, when would you think is the appropriate time to see a sample of the question?
I could get you the sample of the questions next week.
Thank you. Are
Monday.
there any other questions? Thank you very much. Very good presentation.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much for letting me do this on Zoom. My family appreciates you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.